You all know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduced that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't.
Jimmy Kimmel, the name used to conjure images of beer-chugging skits and outrageous antics, a jester who once reveled in the crude and chaotic. Now, he's Hollywood's moral high priest, lecturing us from a pedestal built on, well, you're about to find out. But what happens when two of the media's most unfiltered, unapologetic voices, Joe Rogan, the human Molotov cocktail, and Megyn Kelly, the PR assassin, decide to expose the real Jimmy Kimmel? This wasn't a typical celebrity feud, it was a public dissection, a career autopsy, and what they revealed about late night's supposed jester will make you question everything you thought you knew about comedy, power, and the insidious price of silence. This isn't just about a roast, it's about a man who vanished into an agenda, leaving behind a hollow brand. Get ready, because the truth bombs are dropping, and Kimmel's the target.
All of a sudden, the ideology shifts because so many people are compromised by this very thing that we were talking about before. The very thing that they use to control the media in terms of the news, they use it to control the media in terms of late night talk shows and monologues as well. It's the same influence because they're the same sponsors. The same people are spending the same money on the same networks, and it has an impact. If it affects your livelihood and affects your future and your ability to do this thing that you love doing, which is hosting a talk show, and you're doing it on a network that is paid for by that money, guess what? That affects you.
You've seen it, haven't you? The shift. The moment late night television, once a bastion of irreverent wit and social commentary, morphed into something else entirely. It's no longer about laughter, it's about ideological alignment and the gatekeepers. They saw what we saw. A frail elderly man struggling on stage, a moment that should have prompted concern, even humor. But instead, a deafening silence from the very media personalities who claim to speak truth to power. Why? Because they accurately deduced that he could still be the Democratic nominee, and they don't want to ding him up. Perhaps you give a pass to some, but what about Jimmy Kimmel? He's employed by ABC, a network with a rather large news organization, and he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Yet when a truly revealing moment unfolded, where was he? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't. This calculated absence and selective outrage are precisely what Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly are calling out, and their tag team takedown of Kimmel is less late-night comedy and more career. CPR. From ego-crushing zingers to truth bombs with extra spice, this roast turned into a 3-alarm fire, and Kimmel's the marshmallow. Buckle up, because this isn't your average celebrity spat. It's a verbal demolition derby, and Jimmy forgot his helmet. What exactly did he say, or rather not say, that set them off? It's messier than a Twitter meltdown.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal.
Ooh.
Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get fired.
All of a sudden, the ideological compass of Hollywood shifts, and so many people are compromised by the very thing that controls our media. The same influence that shapes the news also dictates the narratives of late-night talk shows and monologues. It's the same sponsors, the same powerful figures spending the same money on the same networks. And it has a profound impact if it affects your livelihood, your future, and your ability to do this thing that you love doing, which is hosting a talk show. If you're doing it on a network that is paid for by that money, guess what? That affects you. This corporate grip creates a climate where dissent is punished and conformity is rewarded, turning once edgy personalities into compliant mouthpieces. Once upon a time, in the land of late-night television and curated sincerity, Jimmy Kimmel was the jester-in-chief. He was the guy who used to trade in beer-chugging skits, bikini bounce houses, and segments where he'd literally ask strangers to smell his armpit. He was the irreverent, often crude counter-programming to the perceived elitism of other late-night hosts. Fast forward to now, and he's practically the Dalai Lama of Hollywood, clutching pearls over moral crises with the same hands that once high-fived guys for flatulence jokes. This isn't mere personal growth, it's a profound, almost jarring metamorphosis. What happened? Well, Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly have their theories, and they didn't exactly whisper them into the void. Just this past 2 weeks, during the Kennedy Center honors, Joe Biden couldn't even say Dionne Warwick's name correctly, repeatedly calling her Diane, and mistook Barry Gibb for Billy. You know who else was honored at the Kennedy Center? Billy Crystal. And do you know who once opened the Academy Awards in full blackface? Oh yeah, Billy Crystal. And who's gonna be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken in an inner city sort of urban accent, saying she needs to darn those socks as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah? Jimmy Kimmel. Here's the kicker. If you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get fired. This glaring double standard is exactly what Rogan and Kelly pounced on.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable. But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic. You know, the Elon Musk joking around about my pronouns are prosecute Fauci. Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, your pronouns are ass and hole. Which is pretty funny. But then
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, please don't joke about pronouns. It's transphobic to joke about pronouns. So they were chiding him for participating in a joke about pronouns.
So Jimmy Kimmel was doing it. He was doing it too.
Yeah, he was doing it too.
First up, enter Joe Rogan, MMA commentator, podcasting juggernaut, and full-time human bulldozer of sugar-coated nonsense. Rogan doesn't tiptoe into critiques. He charges in like a caffeine-fueled rhino with a grudge against phoniness. For Joe, Kimmel isn't just a late-night host. He's an artifact, a relic of a time when comedy meant something other than holding up cords of virtue. Rogan consistently argues that self-censorship, while sometimes framed as empathy, can become an insidious force that continually narrows the boundaries of acceptable discourse, making more and more things forbidden and toxic. Rogan's take is less about personal beef and more about a spiritual offense against the very essence of authentic expression. See, when you build a career off being the everyman, the dude who says what others won't, watching someone like Kimmel transform into the moral concierge of Hollywood is like discovering your favorite dive bar now serves gluten-free kale shots with motivational quotes. It's betrayal with a laugh track. Kimmel's evolution, or devolution, depending on your seating arrangement, reads like a satire sketch. Remember when Elon Musk was joking around about his pronouns being prosecute Fauci, and Jimmy Kimmel tweeted back, your pronouns are ass and hole. Which, by the way, was pretty funny. But then, almost immediately, people started chiding Kimmel for participating in a joke about pronouns, deeming it transphobic. So, the man who once rode the comedy line like a rodeo bull now clutches a golden moral compass that always points conveniently toward applause, even when that applause is for not being funny. Rogan, ever the bloodhound for authenticity, smells the rebrand from a mile away. It's not just a pivot, it's a full-blown career Botox injection. And nothing says, I'm still edgy, like repeating the same tired political sermon sandwiched between jokes your HR department signed off on. Rogan's world, in contrast, is messy, chaotic, occasionally insane, but always brutally real. It's a place where people disagree without bursting into moral flame. Kimmel, meanwhile, seems to have opted for the safety blanket of Hollywood consensus. What Rogan sees is a man who swapped his comedic soul for Instagram clout. Once unpredictable, now utterly beige. It's like watching a punk rocker from the 90s become a Whole Foods brand ambassador. Sure, he still tells jokes, but now they come with a waiver and a trigger warning. Comedy that used to land like a punch now arrives like a corporate memo.
Got the Sunday morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel, and ABC elevating, the blackface loving Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on, The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards, or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally. Right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up with their racist past without ever acknowledging.
And then there's the ecosystem. The late night landscape Kimmel lives in isn't just sanitized, it's bleached, scrubbed, and gift wrapped for the algorithm. Rogan looks around and sees clones. Same jokes, same politics, same punchlines. No risk, no bite. Late night has become a daycare center for ideologues with cords. Kimmel, unfortunately, is the head babysitter. You have the Sunday morning show with Stephanopoulos leading into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel, and ABC elevating, the blackface-loving Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, the host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on The Bachelorette. She admitted she went to an antebellum party a couple years ago, and he just said, gee, I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. All he said was, are we judging her by today's standards, or are we judging her by old standards? Whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison had to be fired by ABC. Why? Because he's not a committed leftist. Because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally, right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up for their racist past without ever acknowledging it. This isn't just about Kimmel. It's about the entire industry choosing sides and punishing anyone who dares to question the established narrative, no matter how hypocritical it may seem. Cue the transition music, because now, gliding in with a precision strike, comes Megyn Kelly. If Rogan's critiques are delivered with a sledgehammer, Kelly's approach is more like an autopsy. Surgical, clinical, and absolutely unflinching. She doesn't need stand-up specials or bro jokes. She comes armed with a scalpel labeled media hypocrisy, and Kimmel is a prime cadaver. Where Rogan sees Kimmel as a fallen comic, Kelly sees a media puppet, not a clown, but more like a well-dressed sock, a mouthpiece for an industry that only pretends to care as long as the metrics make sense. Kimmel's transformation in her world isn't just annoying, it's strategic. The guy didn't evolve, he pivoted. He saw the winds of political virtue blowing and duct taped a sail to his suit. Kelly doesn't have time for performative empathy, especially when it's paired with a past that magically disappears in the fog of selective outrage. Kimmel, once the king of crude, is now the moral sheriff, except only when it's safe. Funny how redemption arcs are always in sync with contract renewals, almost like they're scheduled. She highlights the magic trick. Kimmel preaches from a pedestal built on the very behavior he now condemns. And Hollywood cheers, not because they believe him, but because he's useful. Yes, hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to others like Jimmy Fallon or George Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie, they sin. They do the very things they accuse you of and the things they say they would never do. Evil things like try to destroy people based on feigned outrage from which they spare their own side. The media loves a redemption story, as long as the redeemed join the choir. And Jimmy, he's practically the lead soprano, but here's where it gets delicious. While Kelly dissects the PR games and publicist-fueled apologies, she also dismantles the incentives. Kimmel doesn't get a pass because he's sorry. He gets a pass because he switched sides. It's not about morality, it's about market alignment. Morals are optional. Loyalty to the narrative is mandatory. This ruthless calculus ensures that only those who toe the line survive and thrive in the Hollywood ecosystem.
You know, they want to shut me down on being on McAfee. They want to shut me up from.
Well, that was the Kimmel thing, right?
Well, no, they,
Did you ever
even
talk to
before
that dude? Have you ever talked to him?
I've been on the show years ago. Yeah.
Would you ever have a conversation with him in person?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, they wanted me to be on a show in the summertime after I got traded.
Really?
There, obviously been some things that he had said about me that made me go, I don't know if I want to do that. I'd rather.
So now you have two wildly different critiques converging on the same man. Rogan called out the plastic shell where a comedian used to be. Kelly spotlights the empty suit behind the media curtain, and both are painfully accurate in their own ways. Rogan sees a once genuine voice smothered by studio polish and approval addiction. Kelly sees a strategic chameleon shapeshifting just enough to survive each new outrage cycle. Together they form the unlikeliest tag team in cultural commentary. One swinging a bat, the other filing a forensic report. The only thing missing is popcorn. The comedy itself isn't even the issue anymore. It's the fact that it doesn't even try. Kimmel, who once pushed boundaries, now babysits them. His monologues are less about punchlines and more about proving he did his homework. Take the Elon Musk tweet again. Do you think that was him or a writer? No, it's him for sure. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. He's a comic. That's a good one. I mean, he used to host The Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous things back in the day. Yeah. The point is, viewers didn't tune in to be graded. They tuned in to laugh. Somewhere along the way, the jokes became sermons, and the punchlines turned into TED Talks with applause signs. That's what Rogan and Kelly nail, the absurdity of it all. A guy who used to represent irreverence now stands for scripted outrage. A comedian who once skewered hypocrisy now schedules it. There's no rebellion left, just rebranding. And in the great irony of modern media, the more Kimmel moralizes, the more hollow it sounds. Not because morality is bad, but because it's so clearly manufactured. Every teary speech, every carefully crafted outrage comes prepackaged for social media. It's sincerity by committee, so what's the damage? Well, for one, late night TV has become an echo chamber so loud it can't hear itself. Rogan watches from his leather-padded bunker of chaos and wonders when comedy became a PowerPoint presentation. Kelly, sipping espresso in her media war room, watches the same clown car crash over and over. Kimmel, caught in the middle, says nothing, but he doesn't need to. His silence is louder than his monologues, because at the end of the day, it's not what he says, it's what he's become. A punchline without a setup, a moral compass with a brand deal, a performer in a play no one finds funny anymore. The numbers tell the story. The Daily Show has the worst ratings with only 366,000 people watching, a drastic drop from over 2 million during the Jon Stewart years. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful, doesn't even crack 1 million at 778,000. For network television, which you don't even have to pay for, it's just there when you turn on your TV. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel averages 1.5 million, also equally horrible. Rogan and Kelly didn't debate him. They didn't even invite him to the roast. They just took one look at the act and called it what it is. A sitcom without a script, a sermon with a laugh track, an empire built on irony, now selling sincerity at half price. And here's where it all starts to feel like a Netflix documentary called The Day the Clown Cried for Ratings. Because when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly both find themselves dragging Jimmy Kimmel through the same mud puddle, one swinging like a blunt force caveman philosopher and the other dissecting him like she's prepping for a high-stakes courtroom trial, you know something deeper is brewing under the laughter track. Let's start with the simple but brutal equation: authenticity versus performance. Joe Rogan's whole shtick is being raw, unfiltered, and occasionally offensive enough to give PR departments heart palpitations. He's never tried to be lovable, and that's the appeal. Kimmel, on the other hand, has turned himself into something resembling a human press release. His once edgy, comedic soul long gone, probably traded it for a nicer hairpiece and a moral high ground with a scenic view. Rogan has often spoken about the pressure to conform, recalling how some wanted to shut him down for simply hosting guests with dissenting views. Meanwhile, Kimmel, who used to be seen as the edgy alternative, has become the poster child for establishment approval. It's like watching a former punk rocker show up at a PTA meeting wearing khakis and passionately arguing about gluten-free cupcakes. The man who used to lampoon Hollywood now is Hollywood. He's wrapped in branded virtue and sprinkled with whatever the internet finds palatable this week. Rogan's angle. Kimmel isn't evolving. He's dissolving into a safe, inoffensive puddle of applause-seeking goo. Then there's Megyn Kelly, who comes in like a corporate HR investigator who's found the receipts. She doesn't care that Kimmel used to be funny. She's more fascinated by how completely he's been repackaged and resold. In her view, the transformation is too suspiciously convenient to be growth. It's not so much personal evolution as it is moral Botox. Looks clean, feels fake, and needs touch-ups every few months to stay relevant. Together, they don't just critique the man, they expose the system he now thrives in, a system that demands ideological purity over comedic talent. That brings us to the lost art of comedy. Remember when comedians actually took risks? When jokes made people uncomfortable, squirm, maybe even rethink their entire belief system? Yeah, those were the days. Now comedy's been sedated, neutered, and tossed in a branded merch store where every punchline must be pre-approved by the PR team and sanitized for your safety. It's not just about content, it's about the suppression of genuine artistic expression. Rogan sees this and screams into his microphone about it. Kelly notices it and raises a chilling eyebrow. But the conclusion is the same. We've replaced genuine laughter with claptrap. Audience applause not for something funny, but for something ideologically correct. It's comedy as a sermon, with Kimmel playing the self-righteous preacher reading from the gospel of whatever's trending. And the media? Oh, it's not just enabling this, it's practically begging for more. The safer, more digestible, more elite approved your content is, the more coverage you get. Kimmel doesn't just survive in this ecosystem, he thrives because he's the model, the prototype, the build a late night host version 2.0, now with 50% less edge and 100% more moral superiority. This shift has profound implications for the cultural landscape, stifling diverse thought and reinforcing a monolithic worldview. So here we are, standing at what can only be described as a cultural crossroads. On one side, the Rogans and the Kellys, flawed but fiercely independent, swinging wildly at the padded walls of the media bubble. On the other, the Kimmels of the world, smiling through rehearsed sincerity and carefully polished monologues, floating gently on the surface of public approval like a duck in a $4,000 suit. But this isn't just about one man losing his comedic backbone. It's about an entire entertainment industry that's forgotten how to laugh unless it's at pre-approved targets. It's about satire that used to bite, now settling for gentle nibbling like a tofu piranha. It's about what happens when comedians stop challenging the powerful and start brunching with them instead. Because when comedy forgets who it's supposed to be mocking, the punchline isn't just weak, it's tragic. And if you need a visual metaphor, picture this. A clown once known for flipping tables now sits quietly at one, sipping herbal tea and nodding politely as studio execs tell him how brave he is. Meanwhile, the crowd isn't laughing, they're clapping, desperately pretending that what they just heard was comedy, not confession. So yeah, Rogan swung the hammer, Kelly brought the scalpel, but it wasn't just about Kimmel. They were both dissecting the same thing, the artificial, calculated, and utterly humorless soul of modern media. The scary part? The punchline landed. The scarier part? It wasn't even funny. Late night used to feel like a bar at 2 a.m. Chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes inappropriate, but always honest. Now it feels like a team-building seminar hosted by someone who used to be fun. And if anyone's wondering where the spark went, Rogan and Kelly just handed you the maps. Because when Joe Rogan, the human Molotov cocktail, and Megyn Kelly, the PR assassin, both circle the same target, you don't get an interview, you get an autopsy. And the subject isn't just Kimmel, it's everything he now represents. Back in the day when Piers Morgan and other figures were on prime time, late night comics would come on and they occasionally would make us laugh. Piers, as you know, they've abandoned that game now. They're just political operatives out there. Look at this. Hey there, how are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great. It was a terrible night. For women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare for our climate, just get over yourselves. Honestly, it's so pathetic. The culture of fake growth, the illusion of bravery in echo chambers, the idea that comedy is only okay if it flatters the right people. Rogan and Kelly didn't just humiliate Jimmy Kimmel, they exposed the scaffolding holding up his entire stage. And they didn't do it with rage. They did it with disappointment, sarcasm, and a well-earned side-eye. The kind of ridicule that doesn't scream, it smirks. That doesn't need a mic drop because the silence that follows is louder. So the next time Kimmel climbs up onto his moral lifeguard chair to warn America about the dangers of mean tweets, maybe take a moment. Ask yourself if you're watching a comedian or a commercial for the new flavor of Kool-Aid, because the jokes used to be the point. Now they're just the delivery system for the lecture. And if you're still laughing, Rogan and Kelly have just one question. At what? Welcome to the roast that didn't need a stage. Just two critics, a hollow brand, and a punchline that wrote itself.